Hello, what's up?
Hello and welcome. Welcome
Hey,
to
guys.
Multiply Ministry Conference. We are so glad to have you here. So excited to be streaming today. This is the live, online, and on demand conference, all about multiplying our ministry through the volunteers that we recruit, we train, we care for. And so we're so glad that you are joining us today. First of all, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Kenny Conley. I am the children's pastor at Mariners Church in Irvine, California. And I'm joined with my two friends, Nick and Kevin. Kevin, Nick, why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Hey, my name is Kevin Monahan, and I am the executive pastor at Journey Church in West Palm Beach, Florida. So, other side of the coast than you, Kenny, out there. And I also lead the Next Gen Master's Program at Liberty and help equip Next Gen through education and that kind of stuff. So, this is going to be awesome today. I'm super excited because volunteers, man, is so important. They're the bread and butter of doing ministry. So, great. Nick, it's up to you.
Yeah, I'm an East Coaster as well. I'm Nick Blevins, Next Gen Pastor at Community Christian Church in White Marsh, Maryland. I'm excited for what we have today. Lots of great speakers. Can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, and this is a conference and experience that's produced and led by Ministry Boost. If you're new to Ministry Boost, the three of us, Kevin, Nick, and I, launched Ministry Boost a couple years ago as an organization that provides resources and training and consulting and coaching for ministry leaders, primarily in the next gen area, but also other ministry areas as well. And it's our heart to equip and boost ministry leaders to do ministry at a higher level and more efficiently. So this is an opportunity for us to share. Nick, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that Ministry Boost offers? So like in addition to this great conference and this experience we're going to have for the next 2 days, what are some of the other ways that we partner with churches as Ministry Boost?
A good question. I feel like a lot of it started because none of us like to have to create things from scratch when we know other great leaders have done other
Yep,
things, and none of us want
100%.
to learn something from scratch when we know some other leader has done it really well. So I think of the things that we do are coaching and courses, online courses. So at your own pace, you can learn something and implement something. We try to pack those courses full of resources that you can just go apply, and then resource bundles. So again, if I want to create a new family retention plan, like one of our bundles, for example, I get that and hopefully it's 80% done. I just have to do 20% of the work to customize it to my church. So we just love sharing resources, learning from each other, kind of growing together. So, because we don't have that much time each week to do it, right? When you're in ministry, you
Yeah,
can't spend 20 hours a week making it better or adding something or creating something new. And so hopefully we help you do more ministry in less time.
yeah. I think the
Yeah,
other
that's
thing we
great.
add to it, sorry, I'll jump in, but like I think the other thing that we add really is the connection piece too, is connecting different leaders that are in kind of the same boats, whether you're a multi-site church or a smaller church or a larger church, whether you're on the East Coast or West Coast, is that sense of community through some of these things, of whether it's weekly calls or some of these other classes and connection things that we've done at different conferences. It allows us to feel like, hey, we're not alone in this. Like you may have some of the same issues that I do. And through a lot of these resources, I love that they're always changing. Best idea always wins, right? Like we're learning from each other. And as we kind of provide this together, it's really great because I mean, you guys would say some of our best friends in ministry support are part of Ministry Boost, have been through that, whether they're instructors or been part of it. So I think it's really exciting to see new people because there's so many new people coming in. Like, hey, I'm a first time next gen pastor. I'm going to work with elementary, or even I'm transitioning out into maybe an executive pastor and adult ministry stuff, and we're able to kind of connect and grow together. So, man, the resources are such a huge part of it, but also the connections, because it's, man, these relationships are awesome, and we do need each other and to learn from each other's experiences, successes, and failures. Like I learn from Kenny's failures all the time. It's awesome.
Every day,
No,
every
I
hour.
think I think that's the secret sauce of Ministry Boost. It is the
Yeah,
relationships. And so ministry can be a lonely place.
yeah,
You can feel isolated, whether you're like, off in a small town somewhere where you don't have access to networks or such, or even if you just, you're swamped and you're overwhelmed and sometimes you don't know how to do what you need to do. And you're wondering
yeah.
where are all the other next gen pastors or where are all the other preschool directors. Ministry Boost is a great place to find and connect with other people who do what you do. So we're going to talk more about that in the coming webcast and tomorrow about different ways that you can connect in through Ministry Boost membership and some other things. Nick, why don't you talk real quick, because I know we're getting ready to launch and get started, a little bit more about what they can expect, on the resources that came with this, how they get access to all access to things, and so talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure thing. So if you're watching this on the conference page, there's the conference guide PDF that you can download below. You can print that out if you want, or just open it up to see kind of a schedule on what we're going to be talking about. If you did not get the all access pass, you'll have access to these live sessions and all of the breakouts. I don't even remember how many there are now. I think there might be 40 or something like that.
That's awesome.
It's a lot of great leaders sharing some really helpful content, and you'll have access to that through Friday at midnight. And then if you want access forever, or at least I say as long as like Ministry Boost exists or the internet exists, you can get the all access pass for $47. But we would encourage you to consider joining Ministry Boost membership, where you get everything we have. I think at this point it's 50 things: courses, resource bundles, different ministry kits and things like that, including the all access pass. It's $27 a month for an individual, $47 a month for your whole staff, and you can get the all access pass included. If you bought the all access pass, you got an email this morning letting you get a discount on membership, so you can check that out. But for this conference, you'll have, after we're done kind of this live portion, we said from 2 to 4 p.m. you can watch breakouts. The truth is, you can watch them whenever you want. Kevin, you can watch them tonight, 8 o'clock when you're sitting on the couch.
Yeah, that's great.
But that's all in our course platform. So you'll need an account there. You might have to reset a password or something like that. But then you'll get in and you'll be able to watch any of the breakouts you want, download the files and resources. A lot of these leaders shared some great files and resources and things like that. And then our sponsors and our speakers contributed a ton of things that we put in like a digital goodie bag. And we just granted access to that this morning for you. So you can go in there and get some free stuff, some discounts. There's all kind of things in there as well. Just tons of great resources. So that's about it. As we're going through this and we have guests on live, we'd love to hear your questions. We're going to ask questions of our guests at the end of every time that we talk with them. And you can ask those in the chat. I would change it from top chat to live chat. That's a setting there in the YouTube live. If you want to see everything, go ahead and pick live chat, so you're seeing what everybody comments. But you can put your questions there throughout each of the sessions, and then we'll come back at the end and ask as many questions as we can.
So ultimately, a lot of free stuff for you guys, but what we'd love to encourage you is become a member and get access to all these things, become part of the community. We can help you with things that we don't have even content or resources for yet, but we can help you through our community. So thank you for joining us. Thanks for giving of your time, and we're gonna learn a lot together.
Cool. Well, I think we're ready for our first speaker. I'm really excited about this. We're gonna have Josh Denhart on. Welcome, Josh. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing really good. Thank you so much for having me. Super grateful to be here, man.
Yeah, you bet. Josh, I'm really excited to have you. You're one of the best leaders I know. I feel like we're kindred spirits, Ministry Boost and you, because you create so many different things that help church leaders, again, not start from scratch or fast forward their growth and their learning. And I can't even think of all the things you do between lead ministry, lead volunteers, Kidmin Science, Faith at Home. Like, I'm just rattling off some of them. So how about you? I'm going to let you just jump right in and talk to us about empowering volunteers, but tell us a little bit about yourself as you get started.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Josh Denhart. I am a former high school chemistry teacher turned children's pastor, and kind of stepped into the deep end of the ministry pool. And I loved the Lord. I loved the scriptures, but I really didn't have much of an idea of how to be successful in a ministry context. And I think that's probably something that you folks yourself may have experienced, right? Where you don't really know what you're doing. And that was kind of my story as well. And as Nick said, I lead a ministry called leadministry.com. Our kind of, I would say, flagship course is Lead Volunteers. Just Ministry Boost and Lead Volunteers and Lead Ministry, very, very, very similar. So I'm very grateful. Hey, listen, I really want to make sure that I jump in right away. Gang, you know, I had the awesome privilege of being the first one to kind of kick off our time today with this conference. So grateful that these wonderful leaders have set this up. And I want to just start by saying, I want to like tease out one concept, and I want to ask if anybody out there could maybe just possibly think about this simple phrase as the conference is going on. You see, success in ministry is not measured by what you do. Success in ministry is measured by what happens if you never return. Let me say it again. Success in ministry is not measured by what you do. Success in ministry is measured by what would happen if you never came back to the church or you never returned. I think that's huge. Now, I did introduce myself, but I also want to introduce someone else, somebody that you probably already know pretty well. If you've been in ministry for any length of time, you likely know this person. It is the enemy of all of our story. It is our nemesis. It is our arch rival. It is the enemy lurking in the background that is seeking to take us out. It is burnout. And I think if you haven't experienced burnout in ministry, I think it's a good case of the normals that you're going to butt into or meet this character. So we do have a problem, right? Problem number one is ministries, they will never be able to hire to meet all of the needs. It's just not going to happen. Number two, you want to involve others, but you're not really sure where to start. I understand that. In addition, another problem is the immediate demands of ministry. In other words, Sunday is always coming. That kind of holds you captive, and you're working in, not on your ministry. And so you want to invite people and you want to develop things, but you're held captive by the urgent and the important right now. But the plot, of course, thickens, and this enemy, burnout, looms large. Why? Well, because developing others takes 2.5 times the work. And of course, we're often, we're afraid that we're going to lower our ministry standards. We're going to be like, hey, listen, I can do this at a 9 out of 10, almost in my sleep. But if I seek to hand this off to someone else, it's going to take a quality hit. And you don't want to lower your ministry standards. And so, of course, you resign to doing it yourself all over again, which leads to burnout. So that's why I'm so thankful that Nick and gang have kind of instituted this really important conference about multiplying yourself in ministry. I think it's absolutely critical. And that's kind of the topic of today, right? The topic of the next 2 days is multiplying ministry. And so as I'm opening this up for us all, I want to make sure that you see that this is not a brand new 21st century thing. This is not like, wow, what a new concept. I mean, Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun, and multiplying yourself in ministry, you see, it's been a part of the law. It's showcased in the prophets. It is definitely a huge part of Jesus's ministry, the early church, and even Paul. And so I'm going to do a really quick race car drive and run fast to kind of touch on some of these areas. You see, Moses, he relied on ministry multiplication. Now, if you know the story, it was kind of a brutal one. Most people don't realize, right, that Moses, as he was exiting Egypt and heading toward the promised land, that he had probably 1 million plus people that he was responsible for. Interestingly enough, the burden of leading and even judging these people and making decisions and being a leader got to be so prohibitive to him that his very own wife, Zipporah, left him and went back to Midian and sat down in front of her dad, Jethro, with the kids. Moses' wife left him. Look it up in the scriptures, and it's a painful scenario. But Moses' father-in-law, of course, he came to Moses, observed this, and he said, what you're doing is not good. And then he kind of concludes, and he says, the work is too heavy for you. You can't do it alone. Well, he ends up coming alongside Moses, and he gives him this elaborate plan, and he says, select from among you capable people. That's what we're looking for. And it says this, bring every different case to you, have them bring every difficult case, to you, but the simple cases they can decide for themselves. Do you realize that? Do you realize that other people have the capacity to do ministry. You're not the only person. You're not necessarily even the most gifted, nor even the smartest one in the room. You see, Moses' dad says, if you're not careful, it says, you're not going to be able to stand the strain. But if you do this, I love that. If you do this and God so allows, you're going to be able to stand the strain. You see, Moses, he put in a ministry plan of multiplication. Don't ever forget that the ministry plan for Moses included people getting to know the law of God in order for him to multiply himself and have other people to judge between the people. People had to know the scriptures. Never forget that people are going to grow as you give away ministry and allow them to participate in the work. Well, I said that the prophets also showcase this. Well, Elijah and Elisha, they institutionalized ministry multiplication. Interestingly enough, a lot of people think that Elijah, they think of him and they think mountaintop experience, fire from heaven, killing 500 prophets of Baal. And that was a huge, no pun intended, mountaintop experience. However, you see, nothing really changed. The nation and the direction of the nation and their heart of wickedness and Jezebel and King Ahab, nothing really changed after that mountaintop experience. Of course, Jezebel vowed to track him down. Interestingly enough, though, as Moses goes all the way down to Mount Horeb, or really, a synonym for Mount Sinai, he really goes back to the basics. And Moses is standing in the crag of the mountain, and of course, the fire and the earthquake, and the Lord was not in any of these. But then it says that a still small voice, and Moses came out and said, "I'm here, Lord." And God told him to do three things, one of which was to anoint Elisha to be his successor. And so, lo and behold, he spent most people don't realize this, the next 25 years, scholars think, pouring in, doing ministry, but right alongside with Elijah. You see, the revival and the restoration of a nation was not through one man's miracles, but through decades of ministry multiplication. You see, I don't think that we're going to see a revival and a restoration, and I don't think that our hearts are going to be settled and we're going to be capable and not burning out unless we involve others. But it is the slow and methodical work of ministry multiplication, and less about the flamboyant and big miracles. Also, the early church leveraged ministry multiplication. Now, if you've been in church ministry for any length of time, of course you know that problems are going to arise. And I have actually turned my thinking, when problems arise, that is actually an opportunity to showcase where we literally might multiply ministry. Well, of course, here it is in Acts 6. You can look at this in far greater depth, along with the Moses story, along with the Elijah and Elisha story. But interestingly enough, right, the disciples were increasing in number, and a complaint arose on the part of the Hellenistic Jews. In other words, there was some needs that were not being met, and the apostles were dropping balls. And the reason that they were dropping balls is that they needed to multiply themselves. Therefore, they made and put into action a plan, and the plan was this. It says, "But select from among you 7 men of good reputation, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, who we can put in charge of this task." And behold, the very first deacons were born. You see, they said it's not desirable for us to neglect certain aspects of the ministry, namely the Word of God and prayer, so that they could do acts of service. They could not do it all. And do you, ministry leader, are you aware that you can't do it all? Have you come to that conclusion? Or do you think that just pushing it a little harder and running a little faster, you see, it's not going to work? Not only that, do you realize that giving away ministry is the answer? Um, quick question: Are any of you inadvertently stealing or robbing people from laying up treasure in heaven because you're manically doing all of the work, thinking that you're saving someone from a too heavy of a load? Hey, listen, God created people with shoulders, and He created people with capacity. It's our job to know those capacities and know those different leaders, but stop robbing people from laying up treasure in heaven. You need to give away ministry. Listen, if you got a complaint in your ministry, maybe it's time to multiply. Maybe that's an area in which you could multiply. Well, Paul, of course, modeled it, and he modeled it beautifully to Timothy when he said these words: "The things which you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust these to faithful men who will also be able to teach others as well." Work with me. This is 2 Timothy 2:2. I call this the multiplication verse. 2 Timothy 2:2. "The things you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust those to faithful men who will be able to teach others as well." You see, there's this chain of events. And Paul had entrusted so much to Timothy. But not only that, do you realize that Paul went church to church? He was not only doing this with individuals, he was doing this on the macro as well. It says this: Christ gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, the teachers to equip the body for works of service so that the body of Christ might be built up. Stick with me for a second. Not only was Paul feverishly pouring into Timothy, but he was also duplicating the entire macro structure of the church. He would go town to town. Do you realize that Paul did not stay in any one of those towns as the, quote, super pastor? I think there's way too many super pastors right now. And what Paul did instead is that he methodically built up the church, laying out a foundation of Scripture, laying out a foundation of repentance, but also laying a foundation of elders and of deacons. And what he did is he got the plates spinning and he moved on to do it again. This is the essence of ministry multiplication. Would it have gone better if Paul had stayed? Possibly, possibly not. But the kingdom growing is better than having one super apostle on staff, if I can have an amen to that. This is really the charge of my life right here. This is the essence of Lead Volunteers. This is the essence of ministry, of leadministry.com. And really this is the essence of this entire conference. Christ gave the fivefold leadership gifts. He gave apostles. Notice prophets is the thumb. It's kind of the odd one, right? Evangelists, pastors, and teachers. He gave those gifts, these leadership gifts, to equip or build up the body to do the work of the ministry. I'll never forget the pastor who was over me for so many years. Every single week he would say to me, "Josh, what are you doing?" And I would say, "Oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this." And then he would say, "That's great. Who are you training to do that?" And I was like, He said, "Because don't forget, the scriptures say that it's your job to build up the body to do the work of the ministry. It is not your job to do the work of the ministry." And I just kept hearing him week after week after week say this maniacally to me. And I was like, well, the guy's my boss. I guess I just better do this. And so I did start to slowly and methodically build into others. And when I was doing something, I found somebody to come alongside to watch me do that. And then I would train them to do that. Why? Because that's what the scriptures say to do. Why? Because I saw a future that I was going to be fried and burning out if I was tasked with doing it all. You know, the answer truly is ministry multiplication. Well, I have to tell you, Jesus, he personified this more than almost anyone else that we see in Scripture. You see, Jesus had the masses. He had the core, the 12, the 3, and the 1. You see, Jesus was a master at bringing about ministry multiplication. Yes, he had the masses in Matthew, let's say 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount. And then Matthew 8 and 9, he was traveling around to the circuit and he was preaching and teaching. And out of that core of 125 people, he said these words: the harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest. And then he himself, very next verse, goes to the top of a mountain, prays all night long. And what does he do? He picks the 12. Interestingly enough, he spent more time with the 12 than he did the core. But beyond that, he had Peter, James, and John. And beyond that, he even had John, the disciple upon whom Jesus loved. Yes, of course, he did bring Peter, James, and John into a healing. He did bring them into a special, right, a special situation, maybe up to the Mount of Transfiguration, and the other disciples didn't get to see that. My point is this: do you realize that it's important for you to single people out in ministry and pour into them in a unique way? And my question to you right now: do you have your Peter, James, and John? Do you have your 12? I think it's absolutely and completely critical for you to have that. Well, gang, I want to say to you, as we are kind of slowly starting to wrap up, I want to say one super important thing as we are kind of closing down, and it's this. It's kind of what I opened with. You see, success in ministry is not measured by what you do. Success in ministry is measured by what happens if you never return. Stick with me for a second. Do you realize that Paul left? And it was both and. Paul was depending on God, the Holy Spirit, to remain with that church at Ephesus and do the work. But he also was intelligent enough to set up a superstructure and model that to them. It truly is the Holy Spirit plus my hard work. Now, the Holy Spirit is going to use even my befuddled work. But don't be a fool. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, therefore shall he also reap. We need to do our hard work, and this hard work is the deepest and biggest calling of our ministry. I want to ask right now if everybody would take out your phones. We're going to do a fun and simple exercise right now. What I want you to do is to take out your phones. I'm going to take out mine as well, and we're going to have just a short time. We're going to have ourselves a quick contest. This is going to take very little time. And what I want you to do is to open up your stopwatch. Okay, I've got my stopwatch open. I'm going to actually stop that right now. There we go. Stop, and reset. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my stopwatch. I'm sorry. What I want you to do is to do your calculator. My apologies. Open up your calculator. Everybody open up your calculator. Sorry about that. And I'm going to do my stopwatch. Open up your calculator right now. And what I want you to do is I want you to do this simple thing. I want you to push 2 plus 2. Do that right now. 2 plus 2. And then I want you to get your index finger and I want you to put it over the top of the equals sign. All right. I'm going to open up my stopwatch and I'm going to ask you to punch equals as fast as you can as I do this for 5 seconds. Here we go. On your mark, get set, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5 seconds. How far did you get? Well, the majority of people that I've done this around the country with get about 85, 86, something like that, right? 86. I had one person get 120 something. So maybe in the comments, you can put down what you got as you manically pounded that button. And now what I want you to do is to clear out your screen. And what I want you to do is take that calculator, clear it out, and I want you to type in 2 times 2. And I want you to put your finger back over that equal sign. Okay, I'm going to pull up my timer one more time. Here we go. Clearing that out. So get those fingers ready. On your mark, get set, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And how big of a number did you get this time? Well, interestingly enough, as I've done this around the country, some people are like, hey man, I don't even know how to read that number, because it started to get into the exponential digits. You see, ministry multiplication is so much more powerful and so much more fun and so much more exciting. It's kind of like me sitting in math class. I loved to do this little game, but it was so much more fun when you push 2 times 2. And I want to leave that with you. You know, we're all short timers. We all are here on planet Earth for not all that long. Paul knew his inevitable end, and so he thought of his ministry not just what he was going to do, but he thought of his ministry as what is going to happen when he never comes back to the church at Philippi. Would it carry on? Would the church at Ephesus carry on and do its work and build believers? And so that's the charge that I have for you folks today. Success in ministry is not what you do. Success in ministry is measured by what happens if you never came back. You see, Elisha, he carried on after Elijah was taken to heaven. The ministry didn't stop. When Jesus exited and was ascending into heaven, his disciples didn't want him to go. And he said, but if I don't go, I can't send the Spirit. When Jesus exited, the ministry carried on. Yes, through the Spirit, but also through the lessons and the logic and the heart and the process by which he had trained his disciples to do ministry. Gang, I hope this has been a positive for you today. My name is Josh Denhart. I'm super, super, super grateful. I do run a ministry called Lead Volunteers, Lead Ministry. I have a fun podcast called the Lead Volunteers Podcast. I would love to have you join. We carry on a lot of these conversations. But right now, I think we are getting ready to have a quick Q&A. So I know that we're going to tee up some quick questions here. And I know Kenny might be the one asking them. Okay, Kenny, talk to me, man.
Hey, Josh, wonderful. Thank you so much. What an appropriate message and challenge to kick things off. I want to just even resonate like how important that was, and even how immediate this is for both me and many of us who are leading in this area. That quote that you said, I'm gonna say it again. Success in ministry is not measured by what you do. Success in ministry is measured by what happens if you never return. The reality is that all of us will leave. All of us will cease to lead. And I was having this conversation with one of my employees yesterday, telling her that one day when you are no longer doing this job, somebody else is going to do it. Like, we sometimes get so wrapped up that no one else can do it like I do. I'm holding this all together. But the reality is one day you will not do it, and somebody else will pick it up, where it is. The real trick is finding somebody now, that person who's going to pick it up, finding them now before you leave, so you can really build something. And because those people are already in your ministry, you just haven't selected them yet and invested in them and built them up yet.
You're exactly right. I mean, this is the essence of my entire life. What you just expressed is the essence of my entire life.
Well, and it's a very future-oriented look. In just a few minutes, we're going to have Reggie and Kristen. They're going to talk about parenting and empowering volunteers to lead parents. But even in this, and when you look at your leadership, ministry is overwhelming. It's easy to get lost in the woods, in the trees, but it's very future-oriented. We should always be keeping our eyes on who takes us next, and what's going next. And I love this experiment that you did with this, that the calculator was such a powerful thing, because, and I'm going to let you kind of speak more to this in a second, because I'm going to set you up for this. But, there's power multiplication. I mean, addition is amazing, but there's real power in multiplication. But the essence to multiplication is not just finding people who can do what you do, but it's finding people who can empower other people to do what they do. And so it's about adding that, because we can recruit more volunteers, but if we really want to multiply, it's beyond just finding volunteers, it's finding leaders of leaders, right? Why don't you speak a little bit more to that specifically? How do we move from an addition mindset, which all of us are good at recruiting, like we're good at asking people, but how do we move from an addition mindset to a multiplication mindset?
Yeah, so I have to say, it comes from pain. I literally, Kenny, did not want to be on this recruiting wheel nonstop. I'll never forget the very first time in a ministry context, I had, gosh, I don't even want to tell you how many volunteers I had to get. I had to get like 250 top tier volunteers. I worked at a very large church and I was completely overwhelmed. And I got through that first year and God was very, very, very faithful. But I made in a sense, I committed with the Lord and I said, I'm never doing this again. So my job was at first to keep the excellent ones that God had given. That's step number one. And then begin to look with eyes like Jesus had. He said, those who are faithful in little will be faithful in much. And so I found the faithful in little and I was like, hey man, you're good. The Bible says that you will be better. And so, you go to war with who you have, not who you wished you had. And so I would find faithful people, even faithful in little, and I would seek to grow and stretch their leadership ever so slightly, but also being a shepherd to them and caring for them. Because not caring for them, they're going to get burned and they're going to exit. And then I'm back on the hamster wheel again, right? So I would say you got to start somewhere. Faithful in little will be faithful in much. Kenny, that's my heart.
Yeah. And something that we talk about a ton in Ministry Boost in our courses is a role that a lot of people haven't really tapped into. It took me probably 15 years of vocational ministry before I recruited my first coach. So like the practical application of
Yes.
multiplication is beginning to focus on recruiting as a priority of people who will link arms with you at the upper levels of leadership in your ministry, who will invest, lead, communicate, and care for volunteers, so that you don't have to, because the breadth is too big for you as one leader.
No
Just like
question.
Moses, where he was exhausted and overwhelmed, and that paragraph about how Jethro and Moses unpacked what does a multiplication level of leadership look like is exactly what our ministry should look like as well. When it comes to recruiting, the care, and leadership and communication. Like every one of your volunteers doesn't need an email from you every week.
They do not.
But for you to be able to empower your coaches to communicate to your volunteers, to care for your volunteers, to innovate with your volunteers, that's what empowering leaders, because those are the people going to lead this when you're done and when you step away.
Yes.
Which is all what you talked about.
Exactly. It comes down to like a cascade, right? So in the human body, I'm a science guy, right? And so when there's a thing called a cascade reaction, when one reaction clicks off 18, which clicks off 1864. I mean, just like, so that's what we want. I do an action, my three hear that, my three talk to their three, and it just matriculates throughout the ministry. I don't have the margin to manage 250 people, but God has given me the capacity to pour my life into 3 to 5. And so that's what I'm going to do, with the expectation that the 3 to 5 that I pour into, brother, sister, show me right now who your 3 to 5 are.
That's great. Well, let me end with one more question,
Sure.
because you shared that you started doing this because of you had to, like you were backed against the wall. You had to begin doing this. I think a lot of people don't do this for a variety of reasons. They don't know how. They don't know that they should. Maybe some misinformation. But like, what's a like just a pure and simple next step for somebody who's maybe starting to feel they're on the cusp of burnout. They don't know who to ask. They don't even know, like, well, what would be like a really simple, something they can do today or tomorrow to begin this process of multiplication?
I would say something to begin today or tomorrow is to seek to find 1 or 2 people who don't cancel, who continue to show up, maybe early. They stay a little bit late. Find the faithful few. I get it. Some people out there, you might be like, yeah, but I'll never forget. I was doing some ministry coaching with somebody and they said, hey, but I don't have any like 10 out of 10s. I just got maybe some 2s and 3s. And I said, then pick the 3s, find your 3s and help make them, pour your life into them and see if you can get them to a 5. You go to war with who you got, not who you wished you had. And so, Hey, listen, I get it. You have to start. And so what I would do, quite honestly, is I would find an area that needs the most attention. Like if you have an area that's really sucking wind, that's going to be a place where you could pour in some attention and bring somebody along. Another one. What area do you like least in your ministry? You're like, whoa, can I say that? The answer is yes. There are some areas of ministry I literally did not like. And so that was one that I wanted to offload to someone else. Another one, what gift set do you lack? I only have some gift sets. I don't have them all. Another one, which one would be the easiest to hand off? You guys have all heard about, what's his name? Dave Ramsey, right? With like the debt snowball. I would find the easiest ministry possible to duplicate. By the way, for me, Kenny, it was games. Games are super important. And I know, and I have a deep philosophy that they're a kingdom and a gospel centered thing. But I got to tell you, games was low enough that it was easy enough for me to multiply that. So you got to find the easiest thing and begin to teach somebody how to do that area. So I would find the simplest thing and I would begin to duplicate that.
That's awesome. I love it. Hey, Josh, thank you so much. This is amazing. We'll send people toward your podcast and to the resources that you create. We're so glad to have you with us. What an appropriate kickoff as we begin to think through who are the people who will lead what we've started. So thank you so much, Josh. We love having you on here.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to bring Nick back on here. Nick, how's it going? Everything going well for you?
It's going well. Just getting ready for our next guest. Loved hearing what Josh had to say. There's so many things that were just like convicting, you know what I mean? Because I think all of us have been there and do that. Even now, like I don't think you ever grow out of the spot where you need to empower leaders, volunteers, staff, whatever it is. There's always more ministry we can give away, kind of like Josh said.
And what I love about this, and I love the approach that Josh took, is that I'm a conference junkie. I love to go to learn. I love strategy. I love the mechanics. I love like all those sorts of things. But like this idea of multiplying our ministry, it's not a strategy born out of CEOs and boardrooms. Like this is a biblical basis of how to expand the kingdom of God. And it's what Jesus gave us. It's what came through the disciples, the apostles, and the prophets, and Moses. And so and it belongs in our ministry. So like yes, we teach the gospel to kids, but we also have to empower people, amazing volunteers, empower them, raise them up to multiply our impact, to multiply our ministry. So I love it.
Yeah, I think people think of it like business, though, especially if you start using something like an org chart for your volunteers or a leadership pipeline. You hear phrases like that, and it starts to sound like, wait a minute, this is church. This is ministry. This is. But I agree. I think it started with God. Let's see if our next guests are ready. Maybe if we have Reggie, we could bring Reggie on. But if not, we'll just interact with you all a little bit here in the chat. We're going to be talking about, there's Reggie. We're going to be talking about helping volunteers partner with parents. And so as we're going to start this conversation, I would love for you all to put in the chat, what questions do you have about this? I feel like so much has changed. I've got my questions for Reggie and Kristen ready to go. So maybe you've got some questions as well. We'd love to see those in the chat. Welcome you all.
It's good to be here.
Hey.
Hello. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to have this conversation with you. Can't wait for that. Sounds like everything looks good, sounds good. I think we're ready to go, right, Kenny?
Yeah, no, and I'm excited. For those of you who may not actually know Reggie and Kristen, but Reggie and Kristen are lifelong advocates for the next generation, for church ministry. And actually both of them have played a significant role in my life and ministry, both as a dad and as a children's pastor, as a next gen ministry leader and pastor. And they lead at Orange, and Orange is creates curriculum, they create resources, they create all those things. But most importantly, Orange is a strategy that is very important in helping the next generation find and keep faith. And so,
hey, Kenny, can I ask a question real quick? Did you just say
Yes.
that I played a role in your life as your dad? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Because I
Yes.
was trying
Yeah.
to
As a surrogate,
clarify.
as a kind of a surrogate dad. Sometimes I call and
I
just
just heard a piece of that, and I was trying to
He's
go,
going
oh,
to
okay.
counseling. He's going to counseling for that, I think.
So are my
Yeah.
kids. I mean, yeah, I get it. I mean, and as dads, we're going to counseling because of our kids too. I mean, it kind of works both
Mm,
ways.
it's true. This
yeah.
is true.
Well, and
This
actually,
is true.
before I say that, I want to share because I just thought of this recently. Reggie, I first met you about 14 or 15 years ago, and
Wow.
I got a DVD in the mail, and it was about Orange and the strategy, and I remember watching. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for. But I remember I had a question about baptism and about leading kids to faith. And I remember when I met you about 6 months after I watched that DVD. I love how you flipped the conversation, and you asked me the question. You said, "Are you a dad?" And I was like, I had a 6 month old. My son's 14 now, but I had a 6 month old. And um, you asked me, well, how would you feel about it as a dad? As would you want someone else to do this for your kid, or do you want to be there? And I loved that, and it feels like everything that you do through the filter of equipping parents. Whether we as church leaders feel like they deserve it or not, or they're qualified or not, you always push back to the role of the powerful role that a parent plays in the life of a kid, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that's a great starting place, and I know that Kristen will echo this. If we really do exist to help parents engage with their kids and to help families win, sometimes we confuse the issue because what we really suggest is that families exist to help our churches win. And so to start with the family in mind, especially if you're talking about a conference where you're multiplying influence, only makes sense to train your volunteers so they see the parent a certain way.
Yeah. I know when I first started leading small groups, this was one of those areas that I got it completely wrong, because I was showing up, really, Reggie, you said to help the family win, but that wasn't even on my radar. I was just there to disciple kids and help them fall in love with Jesus and understand more about God and about faith. And that was how I saw my role. Um, and so parents oftentimes felt like they were in the way. If I'm honest, so like early on, that just kind of was where my mind would go. It would be like, well, sometimes they don't pick their kids up on time, and sometimes they don't prioritize what I'm doing here with their child the way that I feel like they should. And there were all these kind of, I guess, human responses. And so meeting you, Reggie, I think just transformed my mindset. I was also an educator, so I was in the classroom. I was working with high schoolers, so high school teacher, and again, just tended to sometimes. I mean, I wanted to support parents. I really did believe in them. I felt like, but oftentimes, I think I had certain mindsets that really got in the way, even though at the time I didn't even realize that was happening. So, meeting you, learning more about Orange, understanding uh, a lot of things that I'd never really thought about before, I think fundamentally changed the way I volunteered, um, and the way that I saw parents moving forward. So, yeah, it was a big shift.
Yeah, because there's a tendency, especially, and you know this, Kristen, as well as anybody, and I worked in student ministry most of my life with youth. There is a tendency for us as kids are transitioning toward independence and that normal thing that happens in a teenage brain where they start, you can use the word rebellion, you can use the word transitioning toward independence, you can use whatever phrase you want to use, but it's so easy for us who are leading them to economize on how we talk about parents because there's this negative space, and we might even love to cash in on that negativity to woo a little bit of the teenager to ourselves, and that's such a
Mm-hmm.
temptation to do in ministry.
Yeah. It can happen with any age group, but in our phase research, we did notice that as you progress from people who work with younger children toward middle school, preteen, middle school, and high school, there is a progression toward a little bit of negativity for parents. And a lot of that makes logical sense, like based on everything that you just said, Reggie. But it was something that we began to notice that you have to fight harder to maintain that belief in the caregiver and the adult in a young person's life. And I mean, just to back up again to why, the things that I think changed my opinion forever, changed my mind forever, were just the numbers. You had done the math, Reggie, around the sheer numbers of hours that kids spend with a caregiver versus the number of hours they spend with us as a ministry leader. It's vastly different. We were joking earlier about going to therapy because of your parents. I think Nick said that Kenny's going to therapy because you parented him, Reggie. But the reality is, parents have that kind of influence. People go to counselors based on what does or does not happen in a home, not based on what does or does not happen in ministry. That's because what happens at home matters more. It has more impact. It has more lasting impact. It changes a person's life in a more substantial way. And so often, I think it's that big picture perspective where we get focused on what we're trying to do in a moment in time in a kid's life. We can miss what will happen if we set a family up, a caregiver up, to be able to have a stronger relationship over time for the long haul.
I'm sure if I'm watching this, guys, and I'm working in ministry, I'm struggling with, the week to week, Sunday's coming. I know your last speaker talked about multiplying your influence by coaching a few leaders, it'll coach the next wave. And so to bring up this idea of, but how are you engaging with the parents? Why that matters as it relates to multiplying your ministry, and how specifically you're going to raise your volunteer base to actually see parents is such a huge issue. And I don't know how you guys see this, but I would say that Kristen made this statement years ago. She said the shortest distance to every parent is the small group leader who's on the front lines with kids and teenagers. They have a different potential. They have a different kind of influence they can have with a parent than anybody else in your church if it's leveraged the right way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this makes sense to you guys weigh in here, but I know now I'm the mom of 3 kids, and if our school organizes like a parent night, generally like the PTA for everybody to attend, this is going to sound awful, but I'm only marginally interested in coming to that, because it's just going to be like general information about parenting or about the school or about whatever. And I'm like, I can pick up the Cliff Notes later. Like, I'll figure it out. But if my kid's teacher calls and says, hey, I want to talk to you about some things going on with Hensley at, in school right now, I mean, I'm all in. I'm all in so fast because it's specific to my child. Most caregivers are going to be more invested when it's specific to their kid. I found this to be true when I'd worked for Orange for a while and I started to come around to the idea of parenting. It changed the way I led small groups. And one of those things was just making an effort to contact parents directly about their kid. And there was such a different response if it was like, hey, if I connect over email, connect over text consistently, and then maybe ask them to come to coffee and we have a conversation. There were things I could say there that we would never be able to communicate as a ministry, big picture. And I had interned for youth groups and kind of been in the global ministry setting, but sitting across the table from a parent going, here's what's happening with your daughter right now. And if she comes to youth camp, I feel like these things could happen. How could I leverage our opportunity at youth camp this summer to help support your relationship at home? Bam. I mean, that's a different conversation than make sure you don't miss our registration date. It's coming up next week.
It's true. I have a question because
yeah.
Can I go with it? Because here's what I know. I know that you all at Orange, one of my favorite things about you all is you're always innovating and dreaming and thinking ahead. And I think sometimes us as church leaders, and especially the church overall, can be kind of far behind culture. The culture's going somewhere and we're years behind it, and depending on the church, maybe even decades behind it. But I feel like you see that. You're out in front. You're trying to help lead the church and church leaders where you think the church needs to be. And so I'm curious, what do you think is in the future? I know you're thinking about and talking about this a lot for the church, specifically as it relates to partnering with parents. So give us some of those things, those conversations I'm sure you're having that I haven't heard, but I think you have some insights, some thoughts, some challenges. What do you have?
I'm going to kick off for a second and let Kristen pick up the big rocks, because she's been in the middle of this research project that's just amazing that we're going to release in the next several months. I think generally speaking, and I think this is what we all know. When COVID hit and the pandemic happened, um, parents stopped coming, families stopped coming for a season, but they had already stopped coming before the pandemic. I mean, when you look at stats nationally, there were a lot of parents who had started for a number of different reasons, um, refusing to participate in churches, and I think it was an indicator of a trust crisis that was existing even before the pandemic related to the church. And we could get into some deep water right here for a few minutes and just talk about why culture and why parents outside the church, and even some parents who come occasionally to the church, don't trust the church and their suspicion, because there's a number of different reasons. And I would even suggest, and this could be controversial, that some parents stopped coming to church for good reasons. And if you were to really sit down and ask them, why aren't you participating in your church? They would give you a list of reasons, and you go, oh, that makes sense. I think fundamentally there needs to be a shift in the way the church sees every parent. And as an organization, we believe that, because a parent knows, whether we think they do or not, they know our attitude about them. They know because of the things we say from our platforms about non-Christian parents. They know because of the things we say to their kids and teenagers about their parenting. I mean, they know what we think about them. And the transition of the shift going into the next 10 years needs to start with us changing how we talk about, how we see, how we respond to every parent, if we expect them to change how they see the church. With that set up, Kristen has so many other layers of things that she's working on project-wise, and the research thing that is happening. I'll kind of throw it to her for a minute.
Yeah, there were a lot of things that I was thinking as you're talking there, Reggie. I think the church obviously needs to reimagine ways to connect and build trust with families. I mean, that is the greatest way forward. If nothing convinced us of that this last year, I mean, I don't know what else would, right? We all kind of felt it. We all felt that moment of, well, if kids aren't coming to our programming, how do we still have influence? And that influence happens through caregivers in the home, raising kids every day. So if we can influence those who have influence every day, we will have a greater impact on the next generation. But it all starts with rebuilding trust. This is strange. I've never talked about it in this context, Reggie, but it does remind me of what Cheryl Batchelder said when she talked about entering in Popeyes. And she transitioned and turned around that organization. But one of the discoveries that she had along the way as their CEO is she came in and discovered that while they loved their customers and while they, were thriving in certain ways, one of the biggest breakdowns for the organization was they had lost trust in the manager of the store. And so if corporate wasn't trusting their managers, they were going to have a lid to what they could do and how they could influence what happened on the ground in a local Popeyes store. And so one of the keys to them kind of turning that whole organization around was rebuilding trust between corporate and managers. I think some of that is a solution for the church as well, that we rebuild trust with families if we want to have influence with kids and teenagers as we're discipling them. So it's so critical to reimagine the way we build trust with caregivers right now. And it's never been more challenging. I mean, I think it's also important to say that we are all one social media post away from losing influence with somebody, right? So it's very challenging to be in ministry right now because we have to say, we have to speak into our culture and into our world. And at the same time, it's almost impossible to say anything without offending somebody. And that's not really what we're called to do anyway, but you know what I'm saying? This is just a challenging world for rebuilding trust. And so that's, I think, the job in front of us. If we were to sum it up, it is rebuilding trust with our community and figuring out how to do that, and understanding it's going to take more than just us. It's going to take our volunteers really doing the heavy lifting. So if you're a ministry leader watching this, that means your job is to equip volunteers to be able to be on the front line rebuilding trust with parents and caregivers. So it's little things. Some of it just starts with, I think, encouraging your volunteer base to get to know every parent's name and to reach out and contact them. I know those feel like basics, but as a volunteer, I don't know how many years I volunteered before somebody said, hey, you should probably know every parent's name. And it might not even be the name that we have in our database. Be transparent about that. So oftentimes the church database isn't up to date and caregivers change, and it can be complicated to track down the name and contact for every caregiver, but make that a priority for your volunteers. And then let them know that it's on them to reach out to contact the parents of their few. You can't do that with everybody, but you can reach out to a few. I don't know, how much time do we have, Nick? Because I have an example here of somebody that did something last week that I thought was just simple and
Yeah,
great. How are
we
we
have
doing on
time. Let's
time?
do it. We're doing all
Okay.
right.
A friend of mine actually forwarded me this email, and this comes from a teacher, but I automatically translated it because it works as a small group leader as well. I just thought this was interesting. She's a friend of mine, and she forwarded me this email from her child's teacher because she was so excited and wanted to celebrate with a friend. And so she sends me this and has all these smiles with it. I have to put on my glasses now, but wanted to share a proud mom
Can I
moment.
clarify that she's got to put on her glasses because she turned 40 a few weeks ago? I'm just making sure everybody knows.
We before we started this broadcast, Kenny, Kevin, and I lamented the fact that we were all wearing glasses before we started the broadcast.
Yeah, I just think that's important to know. Context is everything.
Does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel good or worse that she turned 40?
Actually, it makes me feel older. Yeah.
Yeah, I won't go there. It's so, going back to this, so my friend sends this email, wanted to share a proud mom moment. Have you ever had a day when you're wondering if you're working too much, not being present enough, and then God gives you a wink in the form of an email to let you know that all is well? Today's that day for me. She sent me this email from her kid's teacher. Hey, happy hump day. Your kid she puts in the name, was student of the day today. I just wanted to let you guys know what a great job he's doing. He's rocking first grade. He's a leader in our classroom and such a good role model for all his classmates. He has the sweetest soul with a heart of gold. I'm so blessed to have him in my class this year. Love having him so much. Thank you for sharing him with me. I'm attaching a picture just for you to enjoy. That probably took the teacher, 5 minutes of time? But it's specific and it's personal. And for this mom, it made all the difference in the world. Caregivers are tired, exhausted, trying. So often, all that's needed is just a little note of personal encouragement to say, look, we see you. We're so grateful that you've allowed your kid to be a part of what we do here. And just so you know, you're doing a great work. And to say something specific and good about their kid. I mean, how often does that happen, that you get somebody that reaches out to you in your world and says, I see this specific good thing in your child and just wanted to make sure that you knew that they're doing okay. Sometimes that's all that someone needs to hear.
We need a lot more.
I think that's
right.
I think that's really important. And maybe you can speak to this a little bit, because I know that a lot of us in ministry, and I know this was the way it was for me 10 years ago, when I thought about leading family ministry, influencing parents, I thought that was my job as the children's pastor, as a family pastor. So I thought of it of like, what books are we gonna recommend, what seminars, what parent meetings we're gonna do. But what you guys are actually presenting is a multiplication of influence to parents, in the sense that it's not my job to be that megaphone, but it's actually me empowering other people to do that. So maybe for those that are, this is a new idea to them, like they're passionate about equipping parents, but they don't have an infrastructure, or they don't have a plan or strategy of how to connect leaders to every parent, in that way. So how have you seen churches that have done this really well?
Well, I think it starts with actually training your small group leader. I know when we wrote the book Lead Small, we have the five different values that we want a small group leader to have. One of those is partnering with parents. Actually, there was another organization that took the book and they tried to change the partner with parent phrase to connect to parent or communicate to parent, I think is what it was, because they felt like partnering with parent was too heavy. We actually think there's an there's a potential level of relationship the small group leader can have with a parent, even if it's just a few parents that nobody else can have, like Kristen is alluding to. And just giving them a few things to do every year, they don't have to do them every week or every month, raises the bar tremendously in the relationship with the parent and sends a signal to the parent that you matter in this equation and you matter to us and we believe in you. And guess what? We're not trying to be a substitute for you. We can't be a substitute for you. We want to come along beside you and reinforce what you're trying to do in the future for your kid or teenager. And I know that, there's some other specific pieces, but the one that Kristen said about knowing their name, sending them an email. I mean, if you just did 3 or 4 things and got your volunteers to do those things, and maybe you give them some cues to do those things, that will go miles and miles further. Because here's what turning the heart of a parent to a kid and turning the heart of a kid to a parent is a biblical concept. And there's something about the power of that we have basically left when it comes to the church and our mission and what we do. And we want to turn the heart of the kid to the student pastor, or the heart of the kid to the kid pastor, or, we want to turn, the heart of an adult volunteer to a kid, which we should. But where and when do we do this?
I want to speak to one of the questions here in the comment, because this comment is so common. It happens anytime that we're talking about parents. I mean, for 15 years, every single time that we talk about this issue, this comment comes up. So I feel like it's really important to address. It's somebody who's suggesting that a large majority of the families of the children in their ministry are divorced or being raised by grandmother, aunt, somebody else in the home. So caregiver is expanded from a biological married, parent situation. It's so important for us, especially when it comes to rebuilding trust, that we are very slow to take out a parent or to discredit a parent in any way in our mind. Most kids want their parent to win or a caregiver to win. If their grandmother is raising them and they're watching their grandmother get up and cook them breakfast and take them to school and try to find a way to get their school supplies organized and connect with their teachers, you have no idea how much that kid loves that grandparent. So just be careful that you are not discrediting a caregiver more than a child is discrediting that caregiver. We've had countless interactions, and I wish I could tell multiple stories here, but just last week we met this youth pastor who was just phenomenal, and she came up to us afterward to talk about her home life, and it was pretty
Emotional.
messy.
Yep.
It was a pretty messy situation. Her mother is still homeless. Her father was in jail. She had a lot of complications in her home life, and she had a number of church leaders who kind of wrote off her parents as, I'm so sorry they've created so much struggle in your life. I'm so sorry that they've done all these things, to make your life harder. And that happened time and time again until finally one youth leader stepped in and said, I think that your parents are doing the best that they can in their human condition right where they are. And it's our job to love them, and it's our job to invest in them and to support them. And because of that one youth worker, she unpacked everything that had transpired from that moment when that youth leader intersected with her life. It was an about face for her, because she was able to go back and start having and rebuilding a relationship with her dad who'd been in prison. And was it rosy? Was it perfect? I mean, no, there was tons of stuff, but her father actually came to her high school graduation. She was one of, I think, 6 or 7 kids, and it was the first graduation he'd attended, because the youth leader reached out to say, look, I was thinking about attending this graduation for your daughter. Would it be possible if we sit with you? It was a simple ask in a personal way to go, look, if I'm going to go to this graduation, would it be okay if I sit with you? Making the assumption that he would go. And now he felt like he was welcome and had a place to be part of a critical moment in her life. And the story goes on, and it was emotional. There was a lot more to it. But I just think if we're going to rebuild trust with families, it begins with us understanding the significant role that a care player plays in a kid's life, the impact that can happen when we are restorative in our message about families in every way, And when we really do begin with a mindset that every parent matters and is capable of having a strong relationship with that child.
I love what Tom Bump just said about suggesting that you have leaders contact them, invite yourself into their space, let them know how much you love having their kids. I mean, build a relationship with them. I mean, let's just be candid. I don't mean this in a negative way for any of the responses or what people are saying. What is a healthy family again? I mean, I can't find any in Scripture. They all were pretty messy. And I know enough about Kenny, I don't know enough about Nick's family. I need to dig a little bit deeper. I know enough about Kristen's, her parents were divorced. I know that my mom was adopted by a mother and father who both committed suicide, and she was raised by a 50-year-old lady who never got married, who basically is the reason I have any faith at all. I mean, when you start unpacking some of those caregivers and stories, it's so important that we recognize these are the influencers that are with a kid 3,000 hours in a given year. And you have on a church basis about 40 hours in a given year. So a little bit of influence in those spaces to get them to partner with your strategy can go a long way. And I don't know, I just, I want to encourage you to keep that in the back of your mind, because parents know how we feel about them. And that's one of the things that we need to rebuild when it comes to trust in our communities and when we start pushing down this road. So anyway, I'm just echoing what Kristen just said.
There was one other, just to camp out on this, I'll do one really quick. We've been doing this survey where we are asking people a question. I won't get into that right now, but we're collecting a lot of stories. And there was a lady who wrote in to us that she grew up with a single mom in, I think it was New Orleans. And the way that the church loved her mother when she was a child changed her forever. She talked about it was like growing up in a village of support around her single mom. And she still, it was the way that she still thinks about the church 50 years later. She talks about 50 years ago, this is how the church loved my mom. This is how they showed up for my mom. And I just can't get away from her story and thinking, what if that's the legacy that we leave for a generation, that we love their parents so well that they'll never forget it for the rest of their life? That's
great. Becky Riedman said, where do we begin to teach this strategy and new way of thinking to our senior leadership? What is step one? I think step one is to get your decision makers in a room, have a discussion, maybe using a resource that that Ministry Boost or Orange or someone has about, what does it look like to change the way we see a parent. We have a thing we called creating an every parent culture, which is really going down this road of what does it look like to engage every parent in the way you think about them, the way you see them, and have leaders, start discussing what does that look like? Does our facility, does our language, do the way we set up children's ministry and student ministry, is it inviting to the parent? I read a book that's by an educator that was an interesting book on engaging parents. And this educator even said when a parent walks into a school, by the way the receptionist and by the way the teachers respond and by the words on the walls, they can usually tell, is this a safe place for a parent to be, or are they kind of anti-parent? So, I think there's a lot we can do, but I would start with your decision makers and influencers in your organization and go, how do we create an every parent culture?
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
It's never mattered more.
I love it. Go ahead.
I was just thinking of even a really small practical step is training your small group leaders to even consider their language. This last year, I saw so many because of Zoom calls, because we were being brought directly into a caregiver's home. There were posts both about teachers, educators, and small group leaders, ministry leaders, talking to kids and just using language like, hey, go tell your adult, go tell your grown up. And not necessarily having with our language the assumption that every kid has two parents, a mom and dad married. There's so many little nuances to our language, even just to broaden our language ability to say, hey, if we use these terms, it can just make every kid and every family know we see them and we intend for them to be part of our ministry, right?
Yeah.
And I would
Thank
say
you so
this
much.
too. I would say this too about Kenny and about Nick with Ministry Boost, and they've been with Orange for a long time helping us with stuff. Every answer we're giving, they know as well. They've lived this, they breathe this. You guys should be connected to everything they do because they are on the front lines living this out. I just think we can't reach and change a generation if we're not changing the way we talk about parents. We now have a language in our organization, Sunday at home parents, Sunday at church parents. And going forward in the future, we've got to talk about the strategy for both. What does that look like? So,
love
Well,
it.
tell us
Well,
a little
you
bit
guys
more
have
about that.
given us, yeah, you've given us a lot of context of a way of thinking, way of seeing things. And so we're super grateful that you guys invested some time today into the leaders that are live and people that will watch this later. But I know you guys have been doing a lot of work. Kristen, you've been inviting me and Nick and some others onto some Zoom calls over the last year to kind of unveil some really amazing technology and work that you're doing to help us as church leaders better connect with parents. So could you talk a little bit more about what you guys are working on with the ParentQ app?
Yeah, well, ParentQ app is something we're really very excited about, Kenny. As a nonprofit organization, we exist to support churches in your work to minister to families in your community. So everything that we do is reinvested back into resources that we think are going to be most helpful to ministry leaders who are implementing the ministry on the ground. And so we looked at 2020 and went, what's the most important thing for us to invest in right now? And felt like one thing would be this app that we've had for a while now. It's free for parents, ParentQ app, and every week it loads with discipleship content for kids birth through 18. But as of September 1st, it's going to be updating, and so you'll see a brand new interface on that app. Lots of exciting things coming. Number one is that for churches who want to customize the app, you'll have a page directly in the app for all of your families where families can find everything they need about your ministry. That's everything from your social links, your contact, your giving link directly to your church. It doesn't go through Apple or Orange, but directly to your giving link. If you started a YouTube page, if you started a podcast, if you have an email that you want parents to find, it's all going to be housed right there in the app if you customize it. It also will have push notifications so you can send families alerts and important information directly to the phone. It'll have the ability for families to register for events like VBS or summer camp or whatever you have, even if it's a digital event. So a lot more connectivity for families and local churches. And then I'm just excited about the interface. It's going to look really great. In the kid discipleship content, I will also include devotionals every week, 5 days of devotional for kindergarten all the way through 18. So that's broken out by age group. So there's something for younger kids, something for older kids, preteens, middle school, high school, unique devotionals. And those are on the phone for a parent to share, to print. And in middle school, high school, there's also a link to YouVersion if they want to experience it that way. So just trying to put as many resources as we can into leaders' hands like yours to help kind of enhance this relationship.
Can I say one more
Yes.
thing? I'm noticing what Lisa has said about how do we connect to caregivers who are only engaging with our digital platform. And then Jessica even responded, some don't even engage on our digital platform. One of the things that Kristen has done, and some of this research is going to come out, it's amazing, is drawn a line of distinction between resource and relationship. That we need to have all the resources we can possibly have. They're not a substitute for a relationship. The relationship still has to trump that. But the resources are in place when the relationship can lead them to the resource, but don't economize the relationship with the resource, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if you have families who are engaging with you digitally in the space right now, consider how you can better support them relationally, even if they stay digital. I think that's going to be one of the biggest turning points moving forward is for us as leaders to begin to think about our digital campus. What is your digital campus? Are there families that maybe they watch online, maybe their kids participate through an app, maybe they follow your social channels? Don't minimize your influence if they're not in the building. There may be a reason they're not in the building right now, or there may be a reason moving forward they're not in the building, but how can you deepen and that relationship personally, even if they're participating in your digital campus and not your physical experience? Now, we do believe something happens when we get in a room together, so we're not economizing on that. It's just a suggestion to also consider how we can still be personal with families that are just connected with us digitally.
And I'm just going to echo that. The power of your church in the next decade is not going to be measured by the attendance on Sunday morning only. Going forward,
Right.
you're going to have to figure out as a team how to measure your influence with families who will never come to your Sunday morning programming. That's Sunday at church versus Sunday at home. So,
Yeah.
ParentQapp.church, right, is the website where they can go to get 90 days of
Yes.
free customization, I believe.
I was supposed to say that, Nick. Thank you. Thank you for picking that up. Yes, that is ParentQapp.church. 90-day free trial. Get in, mess around with it, see if it's for you. So there's low risk there. You'll actually be able to see what it's going to look like on a parent's phone before anybody else, would experience it. So you can see what that would look like and test it out.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you
Thank
all
you guys
so much. Yeah.
thank you guys for letting us be a part of this. This is a great day.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you for
you.
creating this experience. It's amazing.
You bet. We appreciate you all. All right, Kenny, that was a
Amazing.
fun conversation. I got to say something I was thinking that whole time that I think other people were thinking too, maybe, or maybe it's just me. I don't know. But the conference is about multiplying your impact through volunteers. And I know partnering with parents always feels like another thing that I want to do. I want to make it a priority, but it's not the felt need that volunteers is, because Sunday comes every week and you're shorthanded, you don't have the leaders. So it's kind of like the urgency can be missing. But I think what you heard them say, and what we would agree too, is even if we did do a better job empowering volunteers, but we miss this, we've missed. We've lost, right?
Right. No, I agree. And I'd say for the last 10 to 12 years, that's been a lot of the strategy that I've led. I know I need to empower great volunteers to lead on the weekend to be successful. That's the thing that's coming every week. But if I can, while I'm empowering great volunteers to lead on the weekend, if at the same time I can also empower them to be great, to partner with parents well, then we win in both. We win in both avenues. And so I love the influence that Reggie and Kristen have had on my ministry in Orange and those things, and I hope it will for you as well. And I know so many of us we want to have more reach into our families through things like the Parent Q app or through an app or a website. And I love this new Parent Q customization app, so that way you can have a digital presence at the dinner table and in the car with your kids, providing the resources. Even if you don't use a specific curriculum or you don't do it quite the same way, they're creating a space where you can customize it to where it feels like your church. And I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, me too. We're setting our customization up right now. As a parent, I'm really excited about like the devotional she mentioned and all those other features as well. But I'm about to jump off and kick it to Kevin and you guys as we get ready to welcome our last guest. So Kevin, you there?
Yeah, man. Man, what a great, it's always so good to see Reggie and Kristen and all of that, man. It's so good. I'm taking notes and jumping into that. And like, man, relationships are just so key, right? Like learning that, and such a reminder. Like Kenny said, we've been doing this a long time, but you still realize how important volunteers are and that purpose and focus of equipping them. So yeah, in a second, it's so excited about our next guest. Justin Knowles is, I think Justin's about to jump in with us. And man, this guy's amazing. I've known Justin for a while. I've known about him. Man, he's out by you, Kenny, out there at Sandals Church.
He is. When I moved here about 7 or 8 months ago, he's actually one of the first people I had lunch with. I had never met him before, but I'd connected via social media. He's very active on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and some other places. And he is a pretty important influencer in the world of student ministry. But beyond that, he's a next gen pastor at Sandals Church, which is a massively impactful church here in the West Coast. And so we're really excited to have him. Before we launch him real quick, just a reminder. I know that many of you're probably taking furious notes. Maybe some of you are thinking like, oh my gosh, I wish my whole team was listening to this or watching this. Don't forget, all of this content is available for free here on this website. All the breakouts are going live as soon as this is done, so you can access all those. But it all shuts down on Friday, and so there's two things for you to consider. One of them is you can purchase the All Access Pass, and as Nick said this earlier, it is available to you forever. I think basically he said, pending the zombie apocalypse, as long as the internet is up, you will have access to this All Access Pass of this content. But on the other side of that, though, too, is we have a membership as a part of Ministry Boost. Is $27 a month for an individual, or $47 a month for your entire staff. And through that membership, you would get access to Multiply Ministry Conference, plus all of our past webinars, all of our courses, all of our bundles, all of our tribe experiences. So if you're looking to dive into the deep end of ministry training, leading volunteers, leading staff, being equipped through those courses and things like that, I would really encourage you to check out what Ministry Boost membership look like. You get all access to this and all the other resources that we offer. So be sure to check this out. Well, Kevin, I'm gonna kick this back to you, because I think you're gonna introduce Justin and kind of
Yep.
set up this next conversation.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks, Kenny. It's great. Where do I sign up, man? It's gonna be great. Like, it's the whole membership pass and all of that, to be able to share with your team and give resources. I know as like a supervisor, there's things that I send out to people too. It's like, hey, check out this one. You've got some different staff and maybe that are in that too. So it's really great and exciting to be part of it. And I think that some of you guys are looking at this and thinking, man, do I need to get it? Yeah, you need to jump in and get it for your team. It's going to be fantastic. Well, let's jump into Justin. Justin is, like I said, he's the kids and youth, oversees all the stuff, the director of at Sandals Church in Riverside. And there's 12 campuses, stuff that's online. If you are in student ministry for even a couple weeks, you're going to know about Justin, about what he does at Download Youth Ministry, all of that. Man, he loves, just like us, helping find hacks and ways to do ministry more efficiently. He's a great thinker, does blogs, podcasts, all of that stuff. And like I even found out that he went on the Warped Tour for like 3 months a while back when that was happening. And so we're really excited. He's talking a little bit about candor today, of how to like have some of those tough conversations and how to be both transparent and kind and all of that stuff in your ministry with your volunteers. And so do we have Justin up there, or we just kick into him? What does that look like? So
I think Justin is still in the process of coming in. So he's logging in here just a little bit. So
okay.
No, so he'll be jumping in here in just a little bit. I know that Justin, his background, I just moved out here to the West Coast. I was in Arizona for 5 years, and I moved out here, and he's been very connected with Download Youth Ministry. I work on staff here with Doug Fields and Josh, who also lead Download Youth Ministry. And Justin's very involved. I think Justin in the past was on staff at Saddleback, and he's very involved with Download Youth Ministry. So if you're part of the Download Youth Ministry community, you've seen his posts and some things like that. And but for the last several years, Justin has been he's been at Riverside, in Riverside, California, at Sandals Church, initially as the youth pastor, overseeing all of the sites and congregate all the sites around Southern California, and then maybe just about a year ago transitioned into the Next Gen Family Ministry pastor at Sandals. So we're excited. He's got a really important conversation about culture that he's going to share with us. And so, but we're just trying to finish getting him online here, where he's gonna jump in.
Yeah, let me jump too. I think one of the things too, some of you are thinking about multi-site church and stuff too. I know that Justin has a bunch of that stuff and a lot of great information about multi-site, because some of you, maybe it's your church you were trying to plant a new campus or something before, and maybe COVID disrupted that a little bit, or you're thinking like, hey, this is my first like multi-site church, or we're thinking about how do we do student ministry at different places. I know Justin's great on that stuff and multi-site information as well. Sandals is definitely one of those churches that you need to look on to learn from and glean wisdom on, because of what they've been doing in different areas and different types of campuses and stuff that they have. I know really, really helpful Because a lot of us, man, when we're trying to like launch campuses, or how do we do student ministry or kids ministry when it's different demographics, different backgrounds, but also different sizes and influence. How do I hire for some of that stuff? Is some great questions. And I know that he's one too. Download Youth Ministry may not have that, but he's one to contact and to learn a lot of information, I know, on his podcast and stuff like that. So yeah. All right.
Okay,
So
we're
it
still
looks
working
like,
on it.
well, Kenny, you may be up, buddy.
I didn't prepare my talk for the emergency talk when one of our technology pieces isn't quite working right. Wonderful. Well, let's see. Let's kick back and talk maybe a little bit about some of the courses that we offer through Ministry Boost that actually help connect people through leading volunteers and equipping volunteers. I know a couple years ago, Nick released a course that we love called the Ministry Playbook, and it's actually a strategic plan. And even out of Ministry Playbook, this last January, we released kind of a connection of that called Volunteer Boost, which is a 28-day challenge to help you recruit volunteers in the midst of a challenging time of trying to recruit volunteers. We provide scripts and templates and resources to help you find a list of prospects, begin calling through those, inviting them to orientations, and bringing them in to serve in that way. So a lot of really great resources that we offer at Ministry Boost that will help you as you continue to recruit and train and equip volunteers. Kevin, what other courses have you found helpful at Ministry Boost that might help people take leading volunteers to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of them, I'm a little bit more of a systems guy. So there's some of our stuff that we've done and everything from leading volunteers, onboarding volunteers. I mean, there's some subsections and stuff of us talking about, like, even how do you measure like your volunteer? What kind of roles do you need? I think sometimes you can go into, certain ministries and it's just like, hey, come be, a kids leader. And that's the only option. And most, sometimes people see that and think, oh man, I'm just going to have to like change diapers and stuff like that. And like the coaching structure stuff has always been really good of equipping volunteers to be coaches over that, and discovering, different processes and systems in there that help you, no matter even if you're like a large church, a small church, maybe you're a church like that is even growing and preparing. We've got everything from that. And for some of you that oversee staff and leading staff in that, there's some of those things. I think even the hacks kind of stuff of like, maybe this is my first year into as a next gen pastor. I know, Kenny, that's always been kind of a fan favorite, the one that you do, and having that being part of that. And so I think, man, there's so many. One of the things I always think is interesting too is like we teach these classes and we learn so much from the students as well. And they're like, yeah, this is what we do, and this is what we do. And people it's this collective of, best practices and things that help. And hey, I read this book, or hey, here's my document. I mean, I think the one thing we get the most often is, Kate, can you share that? Right? Because it's something that you're doing in your ministry. And it's like, hey, I want that. And then we take that and we put those in the class, or we've even had some of the people that are students come back and say, hey, look, we want you to teach that, because like what you're doing is phenomenal for student ministry or for kids ministry in that. So I always like the system stuff, but I always like the ones that are more innovative. And no matter where you are in the last like 2 years, we've all had to be more innovative and think, man, how do I, sometimes do more with less? How do I recruit more in a season where, and for valid reasons, some people are nervous about coming back to church. What do I do with, online, children's ministry, and making sure that there are some parents that are equipped with some of the digital resources. We talk about that too. And what does that look like when I don't really have the bandwidth or even the education or the experience to reach out to families that. So there's so many things. I mean, we do everything that over the years, we've done everything from boxes to like how to train people with in situations that are negative, as far as even some of the worst things that can happen in ministry. And I think it's great, man. We just got to keep diving in, and it keeps changing. I think that sometimes people think that like, hey, you're buying something that's static, and it's like, man, if there's anything about like, you, me, and Kenny in ministry, and you, me, and Nick in Ministry Boost, is we're always changing, always coming up for something, looking at that new idea. How do we do that? I figure if it's an issue for somebody in Cleveland, it's probably an issue for somebody in San Diego. And we've just got to keep figuring out, like, then how do we move forward and figure out these things? So there's a lot of really cool
That's right.
things that are part of that.
Love it. Well, sorry for the extended commercial break on
Yeah.
Ministry Boost. We believe in it, and we'd love to have you join as a member with Ministry Boost.
Yep.
But congratulations, Justin is in, and we're going to kick off that in a second. So I'm going to let Kevin. I'm going to let you hand that over to him.
All right, Justin, how are we,
Hey.
man? You can hear
I'm good.
us and you can hear me. Hey, thanks for joining us. We know we had a couple technical difficulties. I introduced you about you, man. Every time I think of you, I'm like, man, you're on TikTok. You're a blogger, a podcast, father, a husband. Always, I was just saying multi-site stuff. I remember, I was at a church that had, 10 campuses, and man, especially if you're out on the West Coast, but any place, man, we're really excited about having you today. And I know you're going to talk a little about culture and candor and stuff with volunteers. So I'm going to step away, but man, I'd love for you to kind of welcome our viewers and take a look at that. And it's all yours, my friend.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that I was able to get on. And we're here. We're doing it. I think that one of the things that I would like to talk about today in regards to creating a culture of candor with our volunteer teams. And to be honest with you, it doesn't matter what size team you have. If you have one person, if you have 10 people, it's a big part of what we want to do. And we're talking about like multiply ministry is, I think a big part of this is how you like multiply effectiveness. This is how you multiply getting better, multiply creativity. And to be honest with you, I don't feel like I've ever heard a lot of people talk about this topic in a youth ministry setting, and I think it's pretty vital. I mean, and this is something that I'm constantly trying to create for myself and our team and our volunteers to make sure that we could continue to do what we do. Because here's the truth: is that whether you believe this or not, I believe that like ministry going back before COVID is not existent. Like we have to move forward and we have to adjust and kind of keep moving in this new direction. And candor is the only thing that's going to allow us to do that, to be innovative, to move forward, and to be better. And again, I don't feel like anybody really, really talks about like this idea and what it means for within the teams and the teams that we do ministry with in every day. And so whether you have staff, whether you have volunteers, I mean, bring students in onto this because it is a really big deal. I almost called this talk Killing the Culture of Niceness, because I think there's a really big difference between like you have a culture of candor and then you have a culture of niceness. I think we need to kill the culture of niceness. Like, what do I mean by that? Like, for example, most of us, if most of us don't move forward and create a stronger and more effective ministries because we're stuck in the culture of niceness. Notice, it's not kindness, it's niceness. There's a really big difference. Like, for example, have you ever had someone on stage? Maybe they really wanted to be on the worship team and you let them do that, but man, they are just so not good. They're off key and they're just singing or playing away in a different song. Like, it sounds like they're maybe singing a different song altogether, right? And you're like, man, I'm so glad that you have confidence in being led by the Spirit, but we need you to use the confidence monitor because you're all over the place, right? Like there's a really big difference between that. Like, how many of us we have, you might have different people in the wrong places who are maybe not a good fit, and where we have this event that we've always done, but maybe it's not the most effective thing because we've been running it for 30 years. And it's just, have you ever had the saying within your culture of like, well, this is just how we've always done it. And we're afraid not to do that because maybe it will upset people, or maybe it will offend some people, hurt some feelings in those things. And so I think that what we need to do, like, that's the culture of niceness. And we need to get rid of that. We need to kill that. And I'm not saying that we're to shove that woman or kid off stage because they're singing, or fire that volunteer who runs that event. Or what I'm saying is that I want to move into like the future of youth ministry and our leaders to make sure that we are the most effective, that we're on mission, that we are strategic in how we're going, because I think it's so critical And we have to kill the culture of niceness to build a culture of candor. And so candor, it actually allows us to be, listen, open and honest, right? It allows us to be open and honest, kind, not nice, with what is happening, so that we could take our leadership, we could take our team and our ministry into the next level, onto the next level. And so without it, we're just allowing it, just like for the okayness, just to stay okay. And it never falls to the best idea, because I think that's like the thought that I have is like for our team, and we'll dive into this a little bit later, is like the best idea needs to win. So what is candor? So let's talk about it. Candor, the dictionary, right? Let's go into like what it actually is. It's the quality of being open and honest in expression. The quality of being open and honest in expression. So in a word, frankness. And so candor, it actually requires, if you think about it, it requires openness. It requires sincerity. It requires clear communication and a bit of personal exposure. And it's often, and this is why people get freaked out, because it's uncomfortable to be candid, because it requires some sort of a degree of vulnerability of you as a leader and you as a volunteer. And people struggle with vulnerability. And so this is the thing that we have to understand, is that candor in creating this culture, one, it's driven by the leader, because without that, it doesn't exist. But it has to be driven and accepted by the volunteers who are committed into having a culture of candor, because ultimately they want the best product, they want the best service, they want the best small groups, they want the best leader culture, they want the best idea to win. And that does not happen unless we have some candor. And so what does candor mean? Is that when you exert candor in your communication, is that you encourage others to do the same. And so candid communication, it allows you to both give and get information that you need to improve your team's performance and professional growth, right? And so, we in May, usually happens in February, but because of COVID, we had to push it back a few months. But we had our youth conference, and this is the one time a year, or two, there's 2 times a year, where we gather all of our campuses, all of our leaders, all of our students in one spot. And it's pandemonium. And because we had to cancel, we had to postpone it, once, and then twice. And I think we postponed it a total of 3 times. And then finally, when we were sitting down into the planning process, I was kind of freaking out, because we were like months behind in planning. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what was going on. And I remember, like, we were, compared to last year, we were like 3 weeks, 4 weeks behind when we were originally supposed to have all these certain things in place. And so, like, ultimately as a leader, like, I'm behind and I hate it. I'm a high 3 on the Enneagram. And so, like, performance, let's go, let's move forward, let's cast vision, let's do all these things. And so right before our first real big meeting began, I to chat about like all the things that we were doing. I made a list to go over of all the things that we have to catch up on. And I ran it by Belle. Now, Belle is on my team. She basically takes all of this, that's the chaos that's in my head, and like puts it into like logistics and like actually thinking through how we actually do all of this stuff. But and so she takes the chaos and brings structure to it, basically. And she's in charge of all these things. And I said, Belle, today's meeting is huge. It's a really big deal. And I want to make sure we're on the right track. So I have this list of things, of all the things that we need to go over, basically kind of running over into her position, running into the things that she does. And honestly, she's really good at it. And so what she basically looks at me and like kind of with like a dead face just goes, do you not trust me? I'm like, no, of course I do. Like, you're good at what you do. Of course I do. And then she goes again, she's like, do you trust me? I'm like, yes. And then she like kind of does this with her hands. And then she goes, then let it go. Let it go. Because I had a list already. And guess what? I already had all of the things on the list that you made, plus things that you missed. Love that. So she goes like, release it. And so after that, I took a deep breath, and it's true. Like, I needed to let it go. I needed to trust people who are really good at what they do. So that way they're better at it than I am, so that they could do what they do. And the thing is, like, even though I'm the leader, I'm the guy driving it, and she's on the team and she's helping me run the logistics, like, she's really good at what she does, and allowing us to have a culture of candor allows her to push back. It allows her to help me realize in that moment that, like, I can't and I don't need to do it all, kind of like what we kind of talked about in the last session, which I believe it was Josh, or 2 sessions ago, right? That because we've developed this culture of candor on our team, I as a leader was not going to be defensive of her being honest and pushing back, but it also allows her that I'm allowed to speak into the things that we're doing without her being offended into those things. Again, I think about another example of what a culture of candor, of developing, of what that looks like on for our youth ministry team. We do this thing called where we plan all of our sermons out for an entire year. And the way that we do it is that we do it like Shark Tank. Okay. And so everybody, this is not a brainstorming session. I don't like brainstorming sessions. This is a come prepared with stuff session. And so I send out an email to our team and our volunteers. We bring leaders into it. We bring students into it and say, hey, I need everybody to come prepared with 1 to 2 sermons fully thought out. So meaning a title, basic, like, mood board of like what a design could look like, week by week breakdown, points for each week, scripture for each week. And we're going to pitch it. And so we have like 40 people in the room, and everybody has a chance to pitch their idea. And again, we're all up there and we're writing it down on the board. And what was happening is that in this moment, like, shoot, I've been in 15 years of student ministry. I've done so many sermon series and create, and I know I'm a creative guy, but man, I know I don't have all the best ones. And so what's happening is now in this moment is I'm gathering everybody to pour into what we're about to do as a ministry across all of our campuses. So everybody's having this idea. And so everybody pitches this idea. And at the end of this thing, we have like 45, 50 sermon series all up on the whiteboard. And then what I do is then I literally begin to go and I give everybody 5 stickers, little kids ministry dot stickers. And you could pick your top 5 ones that you think that our student ministry needs to hear and observe and to go through. And so everybody goes and then puts it on there. And what happens in this moment is that most of the time, nobody picks their own idea. It allows us to speak into, and it allows us to really craft what the best product is into what we feel our student ministry needs to do. And what happens is that without a culture of candor is that when someone doesn't choose my idea, I get offended, or someone says like, man, that's not really what we need. And you're like, well, I can't believe that they wouldn't pick. That's not what it's about. It's about making sure the best thing happens in the ministry, no matter who says it. And so that's why I love it. Like, our admin had some of the best sermon series that we end up using this year. And, and she doesn't teach, like, she doesn't even teach. And so it's like that kind of candor allows this to happen in order for us to have the best way moving forward. And so there's a great book, honestly, if you want to read it. It's the chapter on candor alone is worth it. And this is kind of what sparked this idea. It's Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull, who's the president and CEO of Disney and Pixar Animation. And this is what he says. He says, a healthy creative culture is one that people feel free to share ideas, opinions, and criticisms. Lack of candor, if unchecked, ultimately leads to a dysfunctional and very defensive team. And so that's huge. And so here's the thing. Jesus, this is not even just like a team culture thing. This is like Jesus modeled this. Jesus and his disciples, they had a culture of candor. And do you know how I know that? Is because I could read. It's in the red letters. Like, look at how Jesus and his disciples interacted. Do you read what Jesus and how they and how they interacted with each other. And have you read what Paul talks and confronts in Candor with the churches that he's writing to? And so just one example, there's many examples of this. So just one example is John 16 verses 21 to 23. Look at this interaction that they have with each other. And this is Jesus and his disciples. So it's from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go into Jerusalem and suffer the many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed on the third day and be raised to life, right? So he's explaining to them all these things. Verse 22, it says, Peter took him aside and he began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. And then Jesus turned back to him and said, Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You don't have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. I mean, come on. That is like that's candor. There's so many examples of Jesus, of what he looks like and how he talks to his disciples. Like, I don't know about you, but I've never called one of my ministry leaders Satan, right? Like I haven't done that yet. Maybe in the future, if it comes to that moment, like that could be a thing. I don't know. But if you think about it, like, candor is so key in Jesus's and the disciples' ministry beyond when Jesus left. Because think about it, Peter felt comfortable enough to pull Jesus aside and rebuke him. Jesus was the leader. He was the Lord. He was the Messiah. And Jesus felt comfortable enough to pull him aside and say, hey, this is not right. You shouldn't say those things. And then Jesus in return says, hey, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. And so just that one reaction, like, just shows like how important it is. And there's story upon story upon story about candor in scripture. And so to kind of move things along, and we're going to go kind of quickly through this, I want to help us understand that what candor is not. Okay. So in order to understand and create a culture of candor within our teams, we have to understand what a culture is not. What candor is not. Okay. So candor is not about aggression. Okay. It's not about aggression. While open communication feedback is so huge and it's vital, it may not always be positive, but it always should be designed to be helpful and offered with sincerity and respect. So you're not coming at somebody, like a wild flying monkey, just coming at them. It's not about the aggression. Candor is not about perfect timing. Part of candor's value lies in immediacy. And so lack of candor and timeline feedback can negatively impact your team in a way that you can't get feedback right away, because what we're doing is we're waiting, like, well, I'll just tell them later. Oh, they look busy. Oh, like not tonight, but maybe next week. But then what happens, it just kind of goes on and on and on and on. And then you never actually sit down with them and have a conversation with them about it. And so candor has the power to transform a mistake into a learning experience in the moment, not later at the perfect time. So like when I go visit our campuses, we will talk that night. We will dissect that night and talk about the good things, the bad things, and the ugly things. And then so that way we could have some course correction there. But the thing is, they already know that it's coming because we created this culture of candor. It used to be like, oh my gosh, Justin's here. When I first got hired, it was like, man, Justin's here. He's got his, he's writing notes and this is crazy. But now if I forget, they ask me. Hey, they ask me like, what can happen? And that's what creating a culture of candor happens. So it's not about perfect timing, and candor is not about personal criticism. Candor isn't focused on the person, but the issue that needs to be addressed. And so by taking a removed approach, because we both all know that we want the best thing to happen and to come in front of us and to move forward, is that you could avoid making a listener feel attacked, because that's the hard part about candor. Why I feel like a lot of people don't like it is because they feel if they don't do this well, they feel like every criticism of their idea is an attack upon them. And so it's not about a personal criticism. It's about, hey, we're taking a step back and we're looking at our ministry, the event, the small group material, whatever, in this moment, and allowing this to make sure that we have the best foot forward. And so why is candor important amongst a team, and why is it important for a leader to cultivate it and leaders to buy into it together? It's because, number one, it's positive communication. Candor shows that you are inherently honest toward and supportive of others. Candid statements offered, listen, with the right degree of helpfulness and constructive guidance show that you're caring and that you're not hypercritical. Because there's a really big difference. If this has gone wrong, like you could come off hypercritical, but when you begin to develop this positive communication because you understand you want the best thing for your ministry, it becomes super like caring. I mean, I want this to be better. I want you to thrive. I want you to enjoy this and to get better and better and better. Second thing that it does, why is candor important? Because transparency. Candor creates a culture of transparency and openness. The definition of candor literally it means encouraging anyone and everyone in the organization to voice concerns and challenge assumptions. And people don't like that last part because people get uncomfortable when you challenge. And so we have to allow the transparency and challenge to happen for both a leader and for the volunteer team in order for us to continue to grow. Our church, we have a vision of being real with ourselves, God, and others, because you can't have life change unless you are transparent and vulnerable with what's going on in your life, yourself, and with God and with others. And so transparency and candor, they go hand in hand. And the third part about why is candor is important is that it's a growth mindset. It's a growth mindset. Honesty and trust cultivate a culture where immediate feedback is normalized and welcomed. I'm going to say that again because that's good. And that's so important, is that in this growth mindset is that honesty and trust cultivate a culture where immediate feedback is normalized and that it is welcomed. And so candor creates a learning environment, and that's good. It's a growth mindset. How can we get better? This encourages teams to embrace failures and to take more risks. And so the question right then is, how do you do this? How do you begin to navigate what this looks like? And so I'm going to be talking to both leaders, like if you're the leader of a ministry or if you're a volunteer on a team, or maybe you oversee a certain aspect of your ministry. This is huge. So here's the thing is we need to create a delivery system for straight talk. That's where you begin. Is you have to have this culture of straight talk that puts your team in a room together and plan an event, a camp, sermon series, and charge them with identifying and solving a problem and encourage them to be candid with one another. I remember a buddy at the church I used to work at. It was me and 2 other staff members, and we had 3 interns, and we're writing and we're trying to come up with this idea for this event that we were doing, and we were just going at it. Like, because candor allows you to like go at each other, but then go to lunch afterwards, because you have a delivery talk of straight, a delivery system of straight talk, right? And we're going at it, and like we stopped for a moment because we couldn't land on something, and one of our interns was like, "Are you guys okay? Are you guys good?" And we're like, "Yeah, why?" And they're like, "You guys just seem like you're mad." Like, no, we're not mad. We're all passionate, and we are trying to land on this idea. And we're literally, after this whole thing, we got together, we had some pushback, we landed on one of the best events that we've ever done in that season, and then we all went to lunch afterwards. And that's what candor does, because we have that delivery system and candid talk. And so one of the best ways to do that is begin to have candor with your team, and putting them in situations where you have to have candor, where you want the best thing to come out. And so the tendency is what people think. And when someone pushes back on their idea, and so leader, I'm talking to you, volunteer leader, when your leader pushes back on something that you have an idea, is that most people believe that pushback is the criticism of them. That when they criticize an idea that you threw out or that you do or the event that you run, that they look at it as like a personal attack on them. And that we have to crush that, because that's not what it's about. That we have to set the culture of candor by actually coaching our teams in this setting of straight talk, to help them understand that this is not the case. Because here's the thing is, pushback is good. Pushback is so good. Pushback is not only good, it is like it's needed. It is needed for a team to be successful together. That we have to create a culture in which pushback is not taken personally, but where people know that the pushback is aimed towards a problem at hand and not the person who threw out the idea. And so as a leader, like, we have to model this. So ministry leader, you have to model this. You can't get defensive when people tear your idea apart, when they talk about your idea, when they talk about your event, when they talk about your sermon series. That you have to encourage the idea, your own idea, to be ripped to shreds. So that way, you know that the better product happened. Because if you want to know the best way as a leader to cut down the culture of candor amongst your team, is for you to get defensive when other people are showing candor to you. And so ultimately, here's what I think it comes down to, is that a team without a culture of candor is a team full of good ideas, not great ideas. It's a team full of good ideas, not great ideas. Why? Because early on, all ideas suck. It's true. You could have the best idea ever, but the first draft of any idea is not the best version of the idea. And I know that I have good ideas. I'm a creative guy, and I think about all the crazy things in order for us to continue to reach students for Jesus. But I know that in a culture of candor, the ability for a team to rip an idea, to speak openly, to critique, to encourage, to poke holes in it, for people to speak into, not only creates more buy-in amongst the people that are in the room helping you with that idea, but it creates just a better product in the end, because we allowed people to speak into it. That a good idea turns into a great idea amidst a culture of candor. And that our team motto when it comes to planning is the best idea wins, period. Doesn't matter who said it. Is that every year we put everything on the table, chopping block. Is there something that's better than what we're doing currently? If it's better, we're doing that instead. It doesn't matter how long we've done it, right? And so the best idea wins, period. So here's what I know, that this process, listen, this process takes patience. It takes patience. The process takes time. The process takes course correcting when people get defensive, that you have to help them understand that they're not their ideas, and that you have to have the candor and when something is critiqued. But here's what I also know, is that this process is worth it. Why? Because as a leader, as a team, that when you create a culture of candor, real, honest candor, that the good ideas turn into great ideas, and the buy-in amongst everybody else who's now has a voice, that this is not a dictatorship where me as a leader says, this is what we're doing. But now everybody's allowing to speak into it and to poke holes in it. It makes the team and the community so much stronger, and the better things come out of it. And so leaders, ministry leaders, youth pastor, whoever's leading, because this goes with everybody, is that something that you need to know is that you need to model it. You need to be an example of what this means. So candor is only valuable if the person on the receiving end is open and willing, if necessary, also necessary if they have to be willing to let go of things that they suggested or things that do not work. Golden cast, anybody? Right? So we have to think through, what does that look like? You have to be willing to let things go, and you have to model it. That everyone in the room needs to have equal say. So if you have students or volunteers, the admin, the janitor, whoever you want to speak into the idea, is that they have to have equal say. That you as a leader can't take charge of the meeting and just at the end of the meeting, after everybody talks about it and says, look, well, you know what? We're just going to do whatever it is that I said. And then if you want to kill culture of candor, that's how you do it. Another thing is that you have to allow people to feel like they could tell the truth in a planning meeting, because telling the truth is the only way to ensure excellence from your team. And so I think that some leaders, because I know that how I am in meetings, I could come off passionate, I could come off intense, but I have to allow space where people could feel safe enough to tell me the truth. Because if leaders can't tell the truth in a meeting, then you as a top leader, it means a couple of things. You're either bullying people, it means that you criticize ideas and like the person and not the ideas, and that means you don't have a culture of candor. If people on your team don't feel like they could be open and honest in the meeting. And the other thing is that candor is not cruel. It doesn't destroy. Candor works when a team is unified. Candor works when we understand that we want the best outcome for us all. And it's a big deal. And so here's the thing, and this is like the biggest thing, and this is where I'm ending, is you, whether you know it or not, okay, in your ministry, whether you know it or believe it or not, you already have a culture of candor. It's already existent. And the last thing is I don't want a ministry, and I'm guessing you don't want a ministry where there is more candor in the hallways or on the patio, like where it doesn't count. Like you want it with you in the meeting in which you are leading, because you're showing other people what candor looks like and where it matters most, where you have control of what that looks like. Because here's the thing, you already have it. Candor's already happening in your ministry team. It's just whether or not you're in it or not. And that's the truth. You don't want candor happening in the hallways and on the patios where it doesn't matter and where it's not effective, where it's actually divisive, where it's actually critiquing you as a leader, where it's actually hurting the ministry as a team. But rather, is as a leader, is like you want to create a culture of candor where you have people speaking candidly where it really counts, because you want the best ideas to come out. So that with your teams, when you're talking about sermons, when you're talking about events, when you're talking about discipleship, all aspects of your ministry ensures that the best idea is to come out, is so that we can steward the ministry that God has given us in the best way possible. And that comes with the culture of candor, because again, I'll end with this, that a team without candor is a team full of good ideas, not great ideas. And my hope and prayer is that you become a team that could begin navigating what does that look like and have some really great ideas in the future of what youth ministry comes with.
Okay, Justin, that was great, man. All out candor. Man, I've learned so much. I'm taking some notes, and I'm the same way. I think in ministry, I remember this phrase a long time ago that was like, hey, to be unclear is to be unkind, and so that we owe it to people to be clear and to share in a place in a kind manner and stuff like that. I think one of the questions that I'm asking is, man, you said you're an Enneagram 3. I'm an Enneagram 3 too, 2 on that. But my wife's a 9. She's more of the peacemakers. And in ministry, we have people that are like, man, I want to keep the peace and I want to do that. And we're also looking for a lot of the people that watch us are like, man, what's that? So my question to you is, if I'm watching this, I'm like, man, I need to have a little bit more candor or honesty and in my ministry. What's one thing that you think I could do like this week? One little, maybe it's a baby step, maybe it's a step this week to say, hey, I want to increase more candor or more honesty and transparent in my ministry.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like the first step would be talking about gathering the people on your volunteer team or your staff or whatever, and begin to actually have a discussion about what this looks like. Because most of the time, like I said, you already have candor. It's just you have to now put it into a more controlled space and get it out in front of everybody, and so, like, for example, what you said about your wife being a 9, I have a couple of 9s on my team. And so when I first started talking about this, like, I could already tell that they're getting a little uncomfortable, and they're kind of like, oh God. But I think there's part of it is it's not only in meetings. Like, for a perfect example is we had a review for our summer camp. And instead of having 30 people in a room talking about and critiquing our camp, is I put it out on a survey, because I knew that our 9s and people who are a little less confrontational, when there's a room of a whole bunch of people doing it, could speak into it and give us some of their thoughts, because now it's in the writing. And he wrote the most out of everybody. Like, it was very and well thought out. And so I think as a leader, if you're the one leading candor and like trying to figure out what does that look like there's even times where you have to like call people out in it in a gentle way of like, hey, Dane, what do you think? And then allow people, because people who don't like confrontation or people who don't like frankness or upfrontness, they're just going to kind of
Right.
sit back and kind of watch and observe everybody, right? And so we have to create moments and make them feel safe enough and help them understand that when they speak up and we criticize it, it's not them.
Yeah,
And so
and
that's the most of it, right? It's people who don't feel safe to tell the truth. And that's something that comes from me as a leader. Do I make sure that everybody knows that they could tell the truth without,
it really does rest on a foundation of trust, right? You're going to have a culture of trust, and it's almost like if people don't want to tell you, why don't they trust you? I mean, I think it was Andy Stanley who has said this quote, like if you don't have people around you that aren't willing to speak up, you're eventually going to have people that have nothing to say. And so I think that there's, I look at like evaluations. I think that's part of it. Like, I even think about this on my team. Do we evaluate things? And do we do that in a way that's helpful, that's clear and helpful, not muddy and complaining, and whether it's evaluations, I've done stuff where you can share an idea and you don't necessarily have to put your name on it. Maybe it's that baby step. And then maybe it's the aspect of creating some of these places where, because the other part of candor too is some people aren't great at it. It's like, we've all been around that one person who just kind of says what he thinks and just blurts it out. And there is a little bit of skill, right? Like, I was just teaching our interns about the difference between asking questions and questioning, right? Like you can ask the same thing, and asking good questions is awesome. But questioning stuff, it's somewhat is in tone and all of that. And I think the same thing is, man, how do I share stuff or ask great questions and welcome that? But I think you're right. I think it starts with the leader of this posture that says, hey, I'm open to this. And I want to be the first one to be honest with me. Or I know, and I've even given permission to some of my key staff to say, if you don't think I handled that right, come talk to me later. And it almost comes to the point where you're like, hey, did I handle that right? Like in a healthy scenario, you start asking each other and doing all this stuff. Well, this is great. Like, is there any other resources that you have? It sounds like you put this together before. And I mean, is there a podcast, or if somebody wanted some additional information or something like that, that they can go to and check out more about candor and culture and how to increase communication or even trust in these relationships?
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, and that's why I was excited to talk about this specifically. I have yet seen one in a ministry setting talking about this topic. Like all the quotes and resources of things that I kind of like what pulled from or made me start thinking through were actually like non-church or Christian books. And so like Creativity Inc. from Ed Catmull was like the one that started this whole thing. And then just kind of doing this, kind of just looking, that's the main one, to be honest with you. And then trying to figure out, okay, what does that look like? Because there's a reason why Pixar doesn't really have many flops of a movies, is because the way that they have what they call their brain trust and allow people to speak into and allow directors to like have their movies be shredded before they get down to like the end result is a pretty amazing tool when it comes to that. And people I see in the chat, like people are like, okay, how do you do this on the begin? Like how I did it. My first thought of it was when I began the process of it, I sat down I came up with 30 questions evaluating our ministry. And I sat down with every single one of my people and had them ask and just go to town. What was good? If we should kill one thing, what should we kill? Notice I said what, not who. Then, if we should still do this one thing, if we could strip down everything, but keep this one thing on a rate of 1 to 10, how would you rate our curriculum? On a rate of 1 to 10, how would you rate our service? On a rate of 1 to 10, how would you, and basically have them allow that and then bring all that information into our team with everybody else in the room to allow everybody to say, hey, this is what everybody thinks. Now let's begin to tackle some of the top things that everybody already agrees with, and
Yeah.
then let's begin to dive into that. That was like step one for like, okay, how do we create this? Okay, cool. Let's gather everybody in the room. Everybody's already given me their individual ideas of
Yeah.
what we should do, and then now I, as a leader, brought it all together and then allowed people to like talk about some of their stuff that they mentioned or wrote down.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we got to wrap up, but I have one last question too. Is as I'm listening to you, it sounds like there's also an internal thing of like, man, how am I being honest with myself? Do I have, whether it's there's probably a correlation between this and accountability or self-evaluation or I mean, some of the healthiest people in ministry, in my experience, are the most, self-aware. It's us that are like, hey, I've got some of my internal checklists and all this stuff, but I also have a handful of people that are helping me in being honest about who I am as a leader, so that I can, like, I have to be honest with myself. I can't, if I'm lying about myself about something, that shows up 10 times clearer in with other people. Mia, as you were kind of wrapping up, maybe what's one thing that you feel like, hey, as a leader who wants to if I'm listening to you speak, and I want to practice more candor, maybe what are some things that I can work on myself? Or I don't mean too specific, like I'm not asking you like what are your sins and stuff like that, but I'm saying more of what are those ways that like that help you be more honest with yourself? Because, man, a disingenuous leader who sees everything wrong with everything else and wants to hear all this stuff, but isn't focused or isn't honest about who they are, is one that's really hard to follow.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that come to my mind is put up and talk about it like, hey, I do want to practice a culture of candor, and so I'm going to put up this idea. Tell me what you think, and then allow your team to speak into it, and then shut your mouth. I think, and
Yeah.
like that's step number one. Like, I really mean this. Let's do this, and don't push back. Don't just allow it to happen. Second thing would be like how you said is I always ask like, hey, if we have a kind of a candorous meeting where we're critiquing stuff, and I'm because at the end of the day, I'm the leader, right? So I have to make a decision and where we go. And make sure that it's the right decision. I always ask, hey, how was that? Did I handle that well? Was I think the Enneagram high 3, high 8. So the spiritual gift of gentleness is something that I've been challenged in, because gentleness is like might restrained. I have the might in order to be able to put my fist down and go, nope, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Or to say, hey, actually this, I've been working and trying to flex my muscle of the gentleness in that, so that we could walk away and still be friends after the meeting. Another part of that, I think the last one would be, I just do, like, for me, you heard me mention the Enneagram. We're a big fan of that at our church. And so reading it and diving into it a little bit more about what I know that how I operate, my mentality, what makes me mad or makes me upset or makes me frustrated in a work setting has been huge for me. And so that way, and for other people. And so I know if that other people on my team's numbers, and so I could say, hey, 9, let's pull this out.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
7, shut up and sit down real quick. Like, let's not get everybody like stop talking. I'm able to like kind of help our room
Sure.
kind of navigate
Yep.
some of that.
Yeah, well, that's good. And I appreciate, as we close down, I think of 2 scriptures that come to my mind. I think it's Proverbs 27. It says, the wounds of a friend can be trusted. And I think that there's an aspect that some of these things, sometimes people say they may sting for a second, but if they're done out of a place of love and compassion and they're truly a friend, they're helping you correct you for next time. And I also think sometimes we think of candor as always being this negative thing, but sometimes people are even afraid to have the candor of appreciation and appropriate affection and care for that. I think sometimes in men, we sometimes can tend to be so driven that it's like, man, it's awesome to be able to hear some of the positive candor and be able to be like, dude, I just really love working with you, or I'm really encouraged by that meeting that you said of going that extra step and having candor in our conversations that are from, because the other verse is like, where it says better is open rebuke than hidden love. And I think about like, man, I want to be, as a pastor, leader, husband, whatever, someone that just mimics that, to the aspect of, I want to be known as someone who is a loving, kind person and on that. And I think the more that you can do both, you're right. People start coming to you and tell me like, hey, how'd that go? Was that, and I can say that, man, that wasn't your best run on that. But let me tell you what you did right. Let me tell you what you probably need to grow in, and let's have that. And I'm like, I'm just appreciate that you're growing and stuff. So, hey, Justin, thank you so much for being with us today. And it's great. A lot of stuff to learn. And I'm going to bring Kenny back in. So thank you for joining us. Kenny, you there with us, my friend?
I am.
There we go.
I'm
get
here
more
with
than
Nick
Kenny
as well.
Hey,
Wow. 2 for 1. Like,
it's not really a deal though. Yeah, that's kind of a negative thing. I'm glad we had Justin share. How about you guys? He's right. You don't hear a lot about this in the church world. You do some in the business world, but I feel like if the conversations I've had with a lot of leaders, I'm thinking of our friend Allie Evans. I think Life Church staff does this really well. You know what I mean? And so you do hear it. You just don't hear it much at conferences or, I don't know, in church leadership books.
Yeah, and it's tough, right?
Because honestly, coming from an Enneagram 7, this has been the greatest area of growth in my leadership and ministry over the last 10 years. I have people on my team over the years. I've had people on my team hold me accountable every week, asking me, is there a conflict that I'm avoiding? And so but when we don't create this culture for our team, then the team doesn't win. Like we don't, like what Justin says, the best ideas don't win. The best ministry doesn't happen. So powerful content. I think that was really helpful for a lot of people watching today.
Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. All right, so Nick, let's close this out, man. What else you got? Some reminders, and then we're back at it tomorrow.
Yeah, we're back here tomorrow, same time. We will probably go long tomorrow too. I'm going to give you a heads up about that because we have 4 live session speakers. Each one won't be as long, so hopefully we won't go, I don't know, an hour long. But we just had so many great leaders that could share and wanted to make that part of the live broadcast. So you'll hear from 4 different speakers tomorrow. Right now, you'll be able to access the breakouts, the on-demand content in breakouts. It's up in the corner. I don't know if that corner is this corner or that corner with a camera, or you can't even see that, can you? So which corner it is, it's somewhere on the webpage where you can click that, or even below. You might have to log in, though. That's the difference. So you could be on this page watching it without having logged into our platform. The breakouts you have to log in for. So you might have to do like a password reset or email Kevin for help. Or no, I'm just kidding. Don't email Kevin.
Here's Kenny's cell phone number.
Yeah, that's right. Text them all kind of things. Email info@ministryboost.org if you do have trouble getting in, and we'll help you get in there. But you can watch as little or as much as you want of that content, and that's open now till Friday at midnight. So check that out for sure.
Wonderful. Right. Okay, well, let's wrap this up.
Yeah, we're
cool.
Done. All right. I don't have a problem with candor. All right. See you guys. Have a good one. We're all good.
All
see
right.
you back tomorrow.
We'll see you all
awesome.
tomorrow. Yep. Same time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Toodles.